Fans of the Danganronpa franchise who have been begging for a sequel, your prayers have been answered. Sort of. Master Detective Archives, Raincode, is here. A brand new mystery game co-developed by Spike Chunsoft and 2Kyo Games, it promises much of the same compelling story and insane humor, but enhanced in every sense of the word. Still, a visual novel is a visual novel. Will Raincode succeed in appealing to a wider audience of non-visual novel gamers? And can Raincode carry the weight of the Danganronpa Legacy? Stay tuned to find out.
I'm super pumped!
Rino, you've been playing Raincode for review for an article on Games Hub, which has been very exciting. I know I texted you. It's like I needed to know your thoughts about this game, being a longtime Danganronpa fan, and as somebody who's been playing this game. So, Rino, where can we find your review of Raincode?
We'll drop a link in the description box below, and super shout out to GameStop for giving me this opportunity. Hopefully the article is a bit more well articulated because I'm probably just going to be throwing things at you in this episode today. But yeah, it was a really, really wonderful game. Such an experience.
A bunch of super weird mysteries are waiting for us inside. Now, let the super fun deduction show begin!
How is Master Detective Archives Raincode? Let's talk all about it in this spoiler-free review.
I have to say that the name of the game is really rolling off the tongue the way you say it, like Master Detective Archives Raincode. It's a mouthful, but I think it kind of describes the game quite summarily. I have barely slept. I don't know when we're putting this out or what time it is, but like just note that my last leg of playing the game before the credits rolled, I played from 7 p.m. until 4:30 a.m. in the morning. It's Japanese summer right now, so literally at around 4. Birds are chirping, sun is rising. I'm looking out the window being like, dear God, I need to be in bed before the sun is fully up. Like that's like my bare minimum, right? But it's just one of those games, like the mystery element, the intrigue, the visual novel aspect that really appeals to me. It's really hard to put down. And
tell me about it. It's like, as somebody who has very little knowledge on Master Detective Archives Raincode, from what I know is that this is from the developers of Danganronpa, one of your favorite franchises of all time. I have no familiarity with Danganronpa, and I have no familiarity with Raincode. What is your history with this team, Danganronpa as a series, and lay up Raincode for me for somebody who doesn't really know anything about this game?
I guess specifically with Raincode, it's really hard to talk about Raincode without talking about Danganronpa, but I'll try and sort of summarize Raincode. So Raincode is a 3D action adventure game with heavy visual novel elements. It's a big departure from Danganronpa, which is much more visual novel oriented, whereas Raincode has just so many things in it. Like there's a couple of JRPG things in it as well. There's a bit of like some puzzles and all sorts of different things. Like the developers have really gone hard into making this quite a multi, I don't know like a multi-format game, like a game that just has like all sorts of different types of mechanics in it. But essentially, the plot, without giving any spoilers away, I'm really, really trying to do right by the community. I don't want anyone to have their game ruined. You start off as a character named Yuma Cocohead. He's the protagonist. Adorable name, right? And he is a detective in training, and he has amnesia. So he doesn't remember who he is, where he is. You just kind of like wake up in this room. And then later on, you find out that you're being haunted by Shinigami, which is literally in Japanese, it's a death god. So you're being haunted by a death god. And the death god is being like, here, I will be your mentor and guide you to becoming the greatest detective there ever is. And so the two of you, through a series of events, you end up in a place called Kanai Ward, which is a city that's very, the aesthetic is very sort of like neon cyberpunk. Like, you know, think about games like Valhalla or like even Cyberpunk 2077, that kind of style. And it's a city where it doesn't stop raining. It's just permanently, like that's just like the one season it has, the one weather it has. And that is a mystery on top of many other mysteries within the city that you're trying to solve one by one, and ultimately just sort of like unlock the big secret of the game, I suppose is how it goes.
That's so interesting. I know that there's a major detective element in this game. Just a general question. How long is this game and how is this game structured? Because from what I understand in the Danganronpa series, there are chapters and there are major moments. Like, is it similar to Danganronpa in that way?
Yep. So there's a prologue. I think there's about 5 chapters, and then maybe like an epilogue. It's all one big blur for me at this point. And I think I sunk about 40 hours in it, which was more.
That's crazy.
It's more than I thought, because everyone's like, "Oh, it's a visual novel, just like read it." But it's not. It's a visual novel plus all these other things, and that's why it took so long. And the side quests as well that are not essential to the storyline, but in a game like this, you kind of want to get all the little pieces to kind of like fill the whole picture. So I was doing those as well, and just time just flew by. It's very much like Danganronpa in the way that the format is. So each chapter, as you unfold with each chapter, you get more game mechanics or more of the map unlocks, so you can explore more. And then it's like, I guess the way in like every time you get a jigsaw puzzle you put there, and then it just unlocks more and more of a bigger picture.
After taking on a case, start by investigating.
I have to look for anything suspicious left at the crime scene and ask around town, right?
You got it! That's how the information gathered in an investigation gets materialized into a solution key, which will help you solve the case.
Solution key?
I don't know how much we're going to talk about Danganronpa. To me, it's kind of just easy, low-hanging fruit, because when I remember this game was announced, a lot of people were, very, very excited about, oh my God, this is finally the spiritual successor to Danganronpa, a similar kind of vein to that kind of game and that kind of story, that kind of pacing, that kind of energy. So I know people are really excited about it, and I don't mean to compare it a lot, but I think in general, I just, before we get to the later half of the other parts of the review, I'm really curious, like, in your mind as a seasoned Danganronpa player, what makes that series and that property so special? And the major question that I have for Raincode is that magic, the magic from Danganronpa in Raincode?
Yeah, so let's talk about the excitement in the community. I think what's really relevant to note is that, so the last mainline Danganronpa game was in 2017, so like Danganronpa V3. And again, no spoilers, but the ending was very divisive in the community. A lot of people just didn't want to accept it. It was just that, I don't know how to describe it. It was like, without saying what it is, but it was just very polarizing. And because of that, the way it just ended, like, it's like, oh, is that it? Like, we need more Danganronpa. And then so when this game got announced, everyone was very excited, because it's like, oh, is this going to be part of the same universe? But it's not, but it has the same aesthetic. It is a detective game. So it borrows a lot of elements from Danganronpa. And I know that we had a conversation before about spiritual successes. And I think based on the trailers at the time when I saw Raincode, because it was such a different game, it's 3D, for example, whereas Danganronpa is like 2D, 2.5D. And just the way that it laid out, it just seems so different. I was like, oh no, it's not really a spiritual successor. But after playing it, it is. I can totally see it, because it's every element of Danganronpa, from like the way the visual novel is told, the mini games, the trials, it's all of that, but like 200% better kind of thing. Or like, well, better might be subjective, but it's like the mechanic is deeper, or the mechanic is more involved. And I think if you watch some of the live streams that the developers have been doing to promote Raincode, Kodaka Sensei, he talks a lot about how he really wants to invite non-visual novel players into the community with this game. And I can see as well why it's not that he's not going to go back to Danganronpa. He has also said like, oh, I'm interested in pursuing that later on as well. But it's like he wanted to make something that was so different. He didn't want to create another locked kids in a school scenario, which is what most of the Danganronpa games are. This game is like, it is mystery. It does have the same sort of investigative elements, but it's in this massive map, and there are all these NPCs that are not involved in the story, but add flavor to it. Whereas a game like Danganronpa is very contained. Like there are like, 12 kids. All of them are a main character to some extent, and they all have ramifications. There's no outside world. That's really how Danganronpa is. But this is like a massive mystery inside an entire city. And you can really feel that sense of like how big they've gone with the game. I think that just answers like one part of like one of the things you asked.
Yeah.
Like what makes Danganronpa such a great game is that it tackles like really, really dark themes. Like we're talking like homicide, self-harm, mental health issues, but with such a bizarre handle on it, you just can't help but laugh. It's like the epitome of like a dark humor game, which can be really polarizing as well. Some people would hate it. Some people think it's, tacky or it's not respecting the craft. But I think the way that he sees it, it's like, I think he said something like death is the ultimate like dark joke or something like that. I think that's what the developers said. And because they're tackling these things that other games don't generally want to touch upon, I think that makes it really refreshing. And then the way that they do it as well, there's a lot of serious discussion, but then there's a lot of like, what the fuck just happened? Like, the characters could be having a serious conversation about mental health, and then like someone just like throws up or makes like a fart joke. It's just bizarre as well. Mm-hmm. The art style as well is incredible. You know exactly if it's a Spike Chunsoft game because of the way I think the character designer is a guy named Rui Komatsuzaki. So he has a very distinctive art style. He's worked on some anime as well, and he brings a lot of I think a lot of emotion in the character portrait. So that's like a big part of visual novel as well, right? Like just having the portrait there and then the dialogue. And that, I think that really hooks the players into, caring about the character and really feeling like what they're feeling. And the designs are very cool too. Like the outfits, the splash art he does is really fantastic. And then the characters wear really cool sort of like cyberpunk outfits most of the time. So yeah, the characters, the themes, I think the mechanic is quite unique as well. As both games have sort of like a shooter style. I don't know why, but like on Steam, it's listed as visual novel and shooter.
Really? What is the gameplay like? Genuinely, like, because from watching a lot of the trailers for this game, not that it's all over the place. It seems like there's so much in this game.
It is all over the place. It really is.
It's really overwhelming when you kind of like look at it in its art style, and I think that's kind of cool in some ways. But from a gameplay perspective, like, what are you doing on a gameplay loop, kind of like an hour to hour kind of standpoint? And is it fun? Because I know the allure for a lot of visual novels is the story. Right, and story is king. But is this a game where you had a lot of fun with?
Yeah. So the main thing you will be doing, I guess, like outside of like following the story, is just like 3D world exploration. So like I was saying, like different to Danganronpa, where you're kind of having that first person perspective, just walking around like pretty standard, very closed environments. This feels much more open. The map is very expansive. You can talk to NPCs. You can like have little dialogue things with like, I guess, talking to the trash cans. This is like really JRPG kind of things. And actually the game rewards you for being, for having that point and click kind of play style. So clicking on stuff, investigating, gives you detective points. And then the points help you upgrade Yuma's skill tree. So that kind of helps you in other parts of the game. So there's all that exploration stuff, and the city is just such a cool place to be in. You'd think it'd be really depressing because it's like raining all the time, but there's just something beautiful with the music, with the colors and everything. Just feels really, really nice. Like lo-fi is kind of how it feels.
Interesting.
And then when an investigation happens, then you're in the investigation mode. So usually you're in a crime scene. Again, you're kind of clicking around with stuff, but you're trying to have like deductive reasoning to figure out what's happening. You click on evidence, you talk to specific characters to get like an eyewitness testimony, and all of that adds up into what the game calls solution keys. So these are like your evidence that you just kind of keep in your pocket, so to speak. And then the third part of the game is called the mystery labyrinth. So this is where it just gets chaotic. So in Danganronpa, or like say in Ace Attorney, it's very much in a trial format, right? So you're defending a specific statement, and then people are like throwing arguments at you and you're trying to like rebut them. But here, I think they really took let's make this into an adventure game kind of vibe. So what you do is you go into another realm, and in this realm, like just weird stuff comes at you in the form of questions. So you're still doing your logic, deductive reasoning, and then there's some like reflex things as well, where you gotta like hit a button really quickly. But it's like just weird stuff coming at you. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's just like, it's kind of like WarioWare sometimes. Like when I was playing, I'm like, this art style in certain points, this is nothing to do with anything else, but it's just the way they set it up as a means for you to advance in your understanding of the mystery. There's other things as well. I think if you watch the trailers, you'll see like there's a mini game where Shinigami goes inside a barrel. It's kind of like those like carnival games, and you're throwing knives at the barrel, and the barrel has like alphabets that keep moving. So you're trying to piece together. It's like Hangman. You're trying to piece together a word, right? And you're just throwing knives at her to knock the arrows out. And then when you succeed, she like comes out and then shoots like laser hearts at something in the real world and then it explodes. It just doesn't make sense, but that's just how it is.
Yeah, from what I understand about, kind of like the history and the types of games that preceded Raincode, it does seem almost as if like the absurdity is kind of what makes these games magical, right? Where it's like you said, they touch on really, really dark topics from what I understand, and it is very real, but they kind of communicate that in a way that is surreal, right? And over the top. But I remember just, again, if you talk about the aesthetic, it's just so overwhelming. There seems like there's so much in this game and it's so hard to quantify and describe this game in one way. I guess the thing that I'm curious of, is it overwhelming? Because when I was looking at it, it's like, wow, this game seems to have so much depth and so much optionality. And it's, again, visually striking in kind of an overwhelming
visually
way.
striking is one way of putting it.
Like literally, I think the visuals strike you, like in some of the stuff that I've seen.
It's a sucker punch to the face.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm just so curious. Like, how is the balance between like overwhelming absurdity, but also like telling a good story at the end of the day?
I guess, like, again, going back to what the developers want to do, which is create just like a more enhanced version of what they've done before. Like, I really want to respect that and understand that, like, they're taking such big risks in creating these game elements that maybe the visual novel community doesn't want. Like, maybe some people just want a really tight story-focused game with a couple of mini games here and there, but they just want to focus on that. This takes a lot longer. So like the Mystery Labyrinth, which I just mentioned, which is the equivalent of a trial scenario, it takes much longer. There's a lot of filler. There's a lot of repeated animations, which is kind of annoying. Like, I did find myself hitting the fast forward button quite a lot, just because like it was going through similar motions. But ultimately, I think what they want to do is just really admirable, like trying to bring more people into the community, and the story still holds up. It's still really, really good. Like, I'm fresh from finishing the game, and I'm just sitting here being like, is this real life? Like, I still feel like I'm stuck in that world, and I'm still thinking about some of the decisions we've had to make, because that's another pretty strong theme to Danganronpa and to Raincode as well. It's that, life is not always black and white. Some of the decisions you make have ramifications. Was this character really in the wrong, even though he was the culprit, or they were the culprit? Was this the right thing to do? And I think that's really what they always talk about. It's like the struggle between truth and illusion, and what is more important. And ultimately, I guess, as a detective, like, truth should prevail over everything. It is kind of how the game is laid out. It's I think the mechanics are fine. They're good. It's refreshing, and I think it will appeal to a wider demographic. But maybe like visual novel like loyal fans will find it a bit like, oh, this is too much. This is a bit fluffy. This is not. I just want to get to the story. That kind of feeling.
Yeah, because like the thing that I have in my mind is like, I'm so fascinated by this type of property, and I know the people who were historically loved Danganronpa are super excited about this title, right? But it begs the question for me is like, is this the game that, as a Danganronpa fan, will they like this? And then as a non-Danganronpa fan, is this the place to start with that type of game? I don't want to like shoebox it in like just a visual novel, because I know this is an elevation of just a visual novel, right? These types of games. But it always is such an interesting one to me. Like, knowing me, Rino, is this game a good entry point to experience these types of games?
For you, that's such interesting. I just feel like we're at this point in games, because we kind of talked about this with Final Fantasy as well, right? Where with Final Fantasy 16, they knew that they might offend or upset some like very core Final Fantasy players by making a game that's so high fantasy, so Game of Thrones-esque, and such a departure from other types of games. But they want to try and do something different again, to bring more people into the scene, to just innovate. And I think Raincode should be respected as an element, as part of that evolution of visual novels. Like, we do have the technology, the capability to make visual novels more than just a lot of text, even though that is the foundation of it. That doesn't mean that's where we should stay. Like, like if we were to just follow the visual novel format, is it just like, I'm just going to make the pixels look sharper like each time for the alphabets? It's like, that doesn't make sense. Like this, I think really just, I think it really just like shows what's possible with the genre evolving. Like, we can have visual novels that have action adventure elements. We can have visual novels which have better mini games than just your typical pick 3 option decision tree type things. For you, I really want you to play it, but I don't know if it will stick. I know
Yeah.
you're not a big visual novel guy, at least in this particular style. But the story just makes it so worth it. It's almost like I kind of want them to make, if they made this into an anime, like I would be like, Arif, 100%, you have to watch it. You have to experience the themes. The story is so good, but maybe the mechanics might be a bit different to what you would normally pick up.
Yeah, and I think that's what, if I'm not mistaken, they do have a Danganronpa anime as well, right? So that's what is so prevalent to me is like the story. I just can't, I don't hear enough. I hear so many people talking about like how good stories are in this type of game. So I'd be really curious to see where Raincode kind of like stacks up against that. But I think you're absolutely right. We're in this genre, we're in this era of games where it's not just can you make a, like we talk about fighting games, right? It's like, can you make a fighting game with better graphics? It's like, what are you doing to this medium? Like, how are you elevating this genre in a way? So that's why I think like from what I've seen about Raincode, it does seem like they are experimenting in a lot of ways. And for me, having trouble, like having difficulty describing this game is almost kind of like that way of elevating the genre as well, which I find super interesting.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, it might be hard in the future of games like this to sort of go to market, because you're like, what is it? It's like, well, what is it not? It's everything. It's so many things. It's hard to describe it, but maybe we'll get to a point where, games are not so much siloed anymore. We're going to kind of go, like, I think we're kind of doing that nowadays as well. It's like, oh, this is a Hades-like, but a dating sim, or this is Harvest Moon with guns or something like that. I think Raincode is going to be like that too. It's Danganronpa with WarioWare elements or something like that. It is probably how we're going to start describing it, because they're so multifaceted these days. They're not just like one genre anymore.
Yeah. So maybe as we come to kind of like a closing of the discussion of our review here, what are some highlights that you really want to pick out from this game? And I'm curious if there's also any limitations with your experience sinking an absurd amount of hours in the past couple of days with this title. I
think a highlight that comes to mind straight away, because it's just been on my mind since I stopped playing the game, is that Spike Chunsoft and Tukyo, I guess is how the other developers pronounce. So it's all the core members of the people who made Danganronpa and Spike Chunsoft have started their own development. So they're co-developing this game. They have such a strong understanding of how their players think, and they take advantage of that in so many different ways. There are so many times in Danganronpa and in Raincode as well where I've taken details for granted because I'm like, okay, I understand how they work. And then it flips on its head afterwards. And I'm like, I feel betrayed in such a, like I feel betrayed, not in like a, I'm angry, but like, that is so smart. I don't feel betrayed as Yuma Kokohei, the character. I feel betrayed as like Rino, a fan of the franchise, because like you knew exactly what I was thinking, and you took that and manipulated that and gave me this result. And I think that's so brilliant. Like it's so hard, I think, like for a developer to do that, to really understand the audience. And like, I see that. I'm like, I see you. Like you're playing 4D chess here, and I understand that. In terms of limitations, I think because the game is trying to do so many different things, maybe it might have been a bit too ambitious, because like it's such a small thing, but the loading screens are so long and also so plentiful, because the game switches from like cutscene to this game mechanic to this game mechanic. Like suddenly you're playing that quiz game, then you're walking around, then you're having the cutscene, and for each of those points, there's a loading screen. So that kind of like took me out of it. I was like, oh my God, like kind of hurry up. And then like I mentioned as well, some of the animations, they're very, very cool, but they get repeated quite often. So there is a fast forward button where you can just kind of skip through that as well, but maybe, cut it down, then we don't have to fast forward through it. I'm not sure. Maybe some people want to watch the same thing over and over again. I'm not sure. So yeah, just like little things like that. But overall, like it's not really, it's like a non-issue for me at least.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, again, as we talk about the evolution of games, right? We've had so many games come out this year that are building on the histories of either franchises or building on what development teams have learned with their previous titles and stuff. I think it's a fascinating discussion that you brought up, where how much do you iterate on a game, and how much of the core things that existed back in the day when you were developing a previous game will stay, right? I know loading we can get into a conversation about like, is the Switch powerful enough to handle this kind of game, and was that part of the reasons why there was a lot of loading? But beyond it, it's I just find that specific part that you brought pretty interesting. Maybe my last thing is, what are some final thoughts on Raincode for you? How would you describe your overall experience, all said and done? And what do you think? Is this a franchise kind of thing that could you see this being like as big as the previous titles that Spike Chunsoft have produced?
I really enjoyed it, and I hope many people do, because if people like it, then they'll make more games. And the ending of the game, I mean, it's a very sort of case closed sort of ending, but it can open up to sequels. It can open up to an anime or a light novel. The same way Danganronpa has so many different properties in there. I think Raincode has the potential for for more games and for other types of media to exist as well. And it, in my review, which unless my editor like kind of cuts that part of it out, I described it as a video game earworm, in that long after you finish playing, you will still be thinking about it. The characters, the themes, you will still be questioning if what you did was the right thing to do. Like, I'm playing the game back in my mind all day today, just thinking about it. And I just love that. Like, I love how much it made me feel something. It's really hard to get that in video games. And I think a really excellent visual novel can do that for you.
That gets me so excited. Like, all things considered, I know, like I said, this is not my typical type of game. But the way that you kind of described that and articulated that, just, it makes me so fascinated. It gets me jealous again of like, hey, I never played Danganronpa, or I'm not a big visual novel person, but the way that you get me excited about it is like, damn, I should pick it up. You know what I mean? Like, maybe this will be the one.
Maybe this will be the one. It feels like you went on a journey alone. It's because it's, by virtue of it being like a single player game as well, and you're kind of holed up in your couch late at night playing it. It just feels like you've gone somewhere alone, and then you've come back, and I'm just sitting here being like, wow, like what an adventure, what a trip.
This is like Rino before Raincode and Rino after Raincode.
It's
like a completely different person.
I'm absolutely a new. I've been reborn. I've been reborn in the rain. That's
Oh, man. Well, with all that considered, let us know, everybody, if you're thinking about checking out Raincode. What is your history with the Danganronpa series? But also, will you be picking it up for newer players? Rino, where can people find your written review on Raincode?
We'll drop the link in the description box below, as we mentioned earlier. But it's at Games Hub, and shout out to them for the opportunity to review this game. Really, really had an amazing time.